Good morning. We'll continue with the essay, The Problem That Has No Name. I think in the last class, we spoke about these American women who faced this kind of emptiness within themselves when they were trying to fit into the image that had been created by the American society, the image of this ideal woman, right? According to the American society, according to the magazines, according to the people, the ideal woman was a person who did not desire a career, who did not want to do anything else with her life other than be a mother and a wife. But even when women took up this, many of them started feeling empty inside, they felt incomplete inside, and they were not able to define what it was. The feeling of emptiness was so strong within them, but still they couldn't put a finger to it. They couldn't give a concrete realization to it. They felt empty. They were doing everything that the society wanted them to do. They were good mothers, they were good wives, they were taking care of their houses so well, they were good cooks, they were doing their sewing, everything. But somehow they felt quite empty inside, and they tried visiting doctors, but even the doctors were not able to find the problem. They were not able to find the reason why these women were feeling like this. Many doctors call this the housewives syndrome. And some of these women started having bleeding blisters on their hands. So the doctors said that it wasn't caused by any detergent, it couldn't be cured by any medicine, but still women started having such kind of physical problems also. So we need to understand that whenever there is a mental issue, whenever you are under so much of stress, whenever you are under so much of internal mental strife, it can be kind of manifested in the form of physical problems. And this is what happened to these women also. They were under tremendous mental stress. What was the reason for the stress? They themselves weren't able to point out. So it was a problem that had no name. And some of them even started showing physical problems. The manifestation of these mental trauma came out as physical problems. So we'll just continue with the essay. Sometimes a woman would tell me that the feeling gets so strong that she runs out of the house and walks through the streets, or she stays inside her house and cries, or her children tell her a joke and she doesn't laugh because she doesn't hear it. I talked to women who had spent years on the analyst couch working out their adjustment to the feminine role, their blocks to fulfillment as a wife and mother. So, what Betty Friedan says is women used to share with her. She was a journalist and she got to meet a lot of women who had these kind of similar problems. And the women used to tell her that sometimes this feeling of emptiness, this feeling of being incomplete would get so vivid, would get so strong that they would just walk out, they would just run out of the house, they would walk through the streets, or they would just sit and cry because they weren't able to point out what it was. They weren't able to define it. Even when somebody told them a joke, they wouldn't be able to laugh because, they were in some other world. They couldn't even kind of be with the people they loved. I mean, physically they were present, but mentally they were absent from the people they loved. So, what Betty Friedan says is she tried to speak to so many women who had gone and met psychiatrists, who had gone and met psychoanalysts, but she couldn't get a clear cut answer to what these women were feeling, right? What was the reason why they felt this? What was this feeling that was there? So, these women were trying to kind of adjust to the feminine role that had been created by society. So, society had carved out an image and they were trying to find fulfillment in that image. They were trying to find fulfillment in their roles as a wife and mother, right? So, but many times, they were very desperate. So, we'll continue with the essay. But the desperate tone in which these women's voices and the look in their eyes was the same as the tone and look of other women who were sure they had no problem, even though they did have a strange feeling of desperation. A mother of four who left her college at 19 to get married told me, I've tried everything women are supposed to do: hobbies, gardening, pickling, canning, being very social with my neighbors, joining committees, running PTA teas. I can do it all and I like it. But it doesn't leave you anything to think about, any feeling of who you are. I never had any career ambitions. All I wanted was to get married and have four children. I love the kids. and Bob and my home. There's no problem you can even put a name to, but I am desperate. I begin to feel I have no personality. I'm a server of food and putter on of pans and a bed maker, somebody who can be called on when you want something. But who am I? So, what Betty Friedan says is these women whom she spoke with, they had a lot of desperation in their voices, right? And it was not like, this was something which she could feel in so many other women who felt they had no problem, but they had this strange feeling of desperation. So Betty Friedan spoke with a lot of women, and she said that most of the women that she spoke with did not have a problem physically. Even in their surroundings, they had beautiful homes, they had lovely husbands, lovely kids, and they loved their family and they were actually very comfortable in their family. So there was nothing wrong. But they had this kind of desperate look in their eyes, they had the desperate tone of voice, and it was common to all the women who had the same kind of problem. The problem would be the strange feeling of desperation. So she gives the example of a woman who had 4 children and who had left college at 19 years. We had talked about how the college going age had dropped, right? Because the American society had idealized the concept of being a wife and a mother. Many women left college early to get married and engaged, or engaged and married. So she speaks to a woman of 19 who had left college at who had left college when she was 19. Now she's a mother of 4, right? And she says, she said, I tried to do everything. I tried hobbies, I tried gardening, pickling, being a good cook, joining committees, being in the PTA. She says, I can do everything. And she says, I like it also. It's not that I don't like it, I really like it, right? See, she says, I never had any career ambitions. I always wanted to get married and have 4 children. And I do love my children. I do love my husband. I do love my home. And I do love what I'm doing. I love talking with my neighbors. I love joining committees. I love being on the PTA. I love gardening. I love cooking. It's not that I don't like it. I like it all. There is no problem which I can define. But somehow, deep in my mind, I'm desperate because I feel I don't have a personality of my own. I feel I'm always kind of living up to somebody. I always feel that I'm serving somebody. I always feel that I am just catering to somebody, and I'm just somebody who needs to be called when somebody else needs something. Right? And another woman, when we continue with the essay, we read another woman, a 23-year-old mother in blue jeans said, I ask myself why I'm so dissatisfied. I've got my health, I've got fine children, lovely new home, enough money. My husband has a real future as an electronics engineer. He doesn't have any of these feelings. He says, maybe I need a vacation. Let's go to New York for a weekend. But that isn't it. I always had this idea we should do everything together. I can't sit down and read a book alone. If the children are napping and I have 1 hour to myself, I just walk through the house waiting for them to wake up. I don't make a move until I know where the rest of the crowd is going. It's as if ever since you were a little girl, there's always been somebody or something that will take care of your life, your parents, or college, or falling in love, or having a child, or moving to a new house. And then you wake up one morning and there's nothing to look forward to. This is another example that Betty Friedan gives about a 23-year-old mother who says, I feel so dissatisfied. I've got everything. I'm healthy. I've got beautiful children. I've got a lovely home. I've got enough and more money. And my husband is a very smart young man. He's an electronics engineer. He's got a real future. And he doesn't understand my feelings. So whenever I tell him about my dissatisfaction, he just tells me, let's take a vacation. You need a break. She says, but that's not it. It's like, she feels, what she says is, I feel, I need to do everything with everybody around me. I can't do anything on my own. Even if I have some time for myself, I don't do anything. I simply walk around. I just wait for the others to come. It is as though my life all these years has been revolving around people. It's, like she says, like From the time I've been a very little girl, there's been always somebody to take care of everything. It has either been my parents or it has been my college. It's like even when I fell in love, there was somebody, right? It was, like everything revolved around people. I've never done anything on my own. But one fine morning when I wake up, I feel that I don't have anything to look forward to. It's as though my life is entirely dependent on some people, on somebody. If they are not there, I have nothing to do. So I feel quite empty. And another example that she gives, we will continue with the essay. A young wife in Long Island Development said, I seem to sleep so much. I don't know why I should be so tired. This house isn't nearly so hard to clean as the cold water flat we had when I was working. The children are at school at all day. It's not the work. I just don't feel alive. There was another woman, a young wife in a Long Island development, in a particular place called Long Island, that's a state. So she says, I'm always sleeping, right? And I feel so tired. It's though, I don't have a drive to do anything. It's not that there is so much of work. The house is not very difficult to clean when we compare to the previous flat that I lived in, and the children are at school all day, and it's not the work, it's not the amount of work that is piled on me that is making me tired. It's not because I have too much of work that I feel tired, that I want to sleep. It's as though I feel dead inside. It's as though I don't feel alive. It's as though I don't have a purpose to live. That is what makes me feel so unhappy, and that's what makes me feel so dead. So these are some examples that Betty Friedan gives about women who face this problem which has no name. We'll continue. In 1960, the problem that has no name burst like a boil through the image of the happy American housewife. In the television commercials, the pretty housewives still beamed over their foaming dishpans, and Times cover story on the suburban wife, an American phenomenon, protested, having too good a time to believe that they should be unhappy. But the actual unhappiness of the American housewife was suddenly being reported from the New York Times and Newsweek to Good Housekeeping and CBS televisions in The Trapped Housewife. Although almost everybody who talked about it found some superficial reason to dismiss it. So it was in 1960, according to Betty Friedan, she says, it was almost in 1960 that this problem, which people couldn't name, it just burst out. You know, till then, the image of the happy American housewife had been created, right? So, you still had television advertisements or commercials where we could see pretty housewife smiling and laughing while doing their dishes and all that. Even the Time magazine ran a cover story on the suburban housewife, an American phenomenon, right? So, and they also said they're having such a good time. Why should they be unhappy? It's difficult to believe that they're unhappy. So what happened is the feeling that the American housewife was dissatisfied was slowly creeping into society. And all of a sudden, we see how the American television and how the newspapers and magazines tried to they tried to downplay it. They said, how can that be? How can this American suburban housewife be unhappy? They're having such a good time. But the actual unhappiness slowly started coming out. It began to be reported in the New York Times, in the Newsweek, in television. And it was like people talked about it, but even when they talked about it, they said, see, it is not a very serious problem. Just dismiss it. They didn't take it very seriously. It was, continue with the essay, it was attributed to incompetent appliance repairmen, or the distances children must be chauffeured in the suburbs, or too much PTA. In some magazines, they said, okay, these women are unhappy because they've got so many appliances at home, and when these appliances, they don't work, they call the men to repair, or the repairmen would come and they're incompetent. So they're not able to repair the appliances properly. And that is why these women are unhappy. New York Times reported something like that. And some of the other newspapers or magazines, for example, the Time magazine said that it's because, children have to be driven for a long time. If they live in the suburbs, they have to take them to the city. So the distances the children have to be chauffeured it's quite long distances. And that is why these women are are unhappy. That's what the Time magazine said. And some other magazine like the Red Book said that it's because they're having too many PTA meetings. That is the reason why these women are unhappy. See, the point, the question of the women being unhappy was brought out into the open. The question of the dissatisfaction suffered by these American women were brought out to the open. But people found superficial reasons to dismiss it. They couldn't find the real reason. So they all kind of had these kind of superficial reasons, like, incompetent repairmen, distances, then too much meetings and all that, right? Some said it was the old problem, education. More and more women had education, which naturally made them unhappy in their role as housewives. So some people said, see, it's because women have got too much of education. So when they have too much of education, they don't feel happy as housewives. So because you feel that your education is going waste, right? So you know what? We'll continue with the essay. What New York Times says: the road from Freud to Frigidaire, from Sophocles to Spock, has turned out to be a bumpy one, reported the New York Times. Many young women, certainly not all, whose education plunged them into a world of ideas, feel stifled in their homes. They find their routine lives out of joint with their training. Like shut-ins, they feel left out. In the last year, the problem of the educated housewife has provided the meat of dozens of speeches made by troubled presidents of women's colleges who maintain, in the face of complaints that 16 years of academic training is realistic preparation for wifehood and motherhood. So there was a kind of segment of society supported by the magazines and newspapers and TV programs, which kept on saying that the women face unhappiness or dissatisfaction because they have got too much of education, right? Because they've got too much of education, they live in a world of ideas. When they live in a world of ideas, they feel so stifled. They feel so choked. They find that the routine lives that they are living, it's not in sync with the training that they got. So they feel quite left out. So what happened was, in that particular year, in the early 1960s, or maybe 1960, 1961, there were so many speeches made in women's colleges by the presidents of the women's colleges, who said that it is only necessary to educate women for 16 years. They just need 16 years of academic training, because that would prepare them for wifehood and motherhood. If you give them more training, what will happen is they would feel stifled in a world of ideas. So it's not good to allow women to go beyond 16 years of academic training. That was the kind of analysis that they made. That is what they came to understand, or that is what they tried to portray to the world. We'll continue. There was so much sympathy for the educated housewife, like a two-headed schizophrenic. Once she wrote a paper on the graveyard poets, now she writes notes to the milkman. Once she determined the boiling point of sulfuric acid, now she determines her boiling point with overdue repairmen. The housewife is often reduced to screams and tears. No one, it seems, is appreciative, least of all herself, or the kind of person she becomes in the process of turning from poetess into shrew. So, there was a lot of sympathy in the American society for these women who had been educated. What people felt, that they got so much of education that they were stifled in their homes. So there was this comparison of women who wrote papers on graveyard poets, right? Who wrote papers on literature and now writing notes to the milkmen. Women who had determined the boiling point of sulfuric acid, now determining her boiling point. That means she gets so worked up when she does not get the repairman come on time to repair her appliance. And the housewife is often reduced to screams and tears. That means nobody appreciates her. She herself does not appreciate her. And the kind of person that she becomes, how is this process? Like, how does she turn from a poetess who wrote about graveyard poets now into a shrew who is always screaming and shrieking at others? What is the reason is something which nobody tries to find out. Nobody is appreciative of her, and she herself is not able to appreciate herself. So Betty Friedan continues saying, home economists suggested more realistic preparation for housewife, such as high school workshops on home appliances. There are some people who were adept in home economics. They said that it is very good, to prepare women when they're in high school, to prepare them to deal with things like home appliances. So instead of giving them workshops on poetry and mathematics, give them a workshop on how to repair and take care of home appliances, because many of the people started telling or started bringing out the idea that women were getting worked up because they were not getting the servicemen to repair their appliances on time. That was one of the reasons that was perpetrated, or one of the ideas that was kind of thrown around in society. Continue with the essay. College educators suggested more discussion groups on home management and the family to prepare women for the adjustment to domestic life. A spate of articles appeared in the mass magazines offering 58 ways to make your marriage more exciting. No month went by without a new book by a psychiatrist or sexologist offering technical advice on finding greater fulfillment through sex. So, what happened is when the American society realized that the women were dissatisfied and unhappy, there were so many ideas and so many solutions that were brought into society. So, in college, educators, academicians started suggesting to have discussion groups on home management and family to prepare women for adjustment to domestic life. So, when they were in college or when they were in school, you should kind of give them a lot of discussion topics, and you should have groups which would teach them home management, how to manage the family, how to adjust in domestic life. And on top of that, a lot of articles also started coming in magazines, about how to make marriage successful, how to make marriage exciting. And even beyond that, we had, there were books by psychiatrists and articles by sexologists who started giving technical advice on how to find greater fulfillment through sex. Because many people in society, 98% of people in society believe that the women were dissatisfied because they were not taught properly in college about home management, home appliances, how to manage family, how to make marriages exciting, right? And they were not even taught how to have a fulfillment, how to have a fulfilling sexual life. So many people felt that this was the reason why women were dissatisfied, or these were the reasons why women were dissatisfied. Nobody actually went to probe deep into into the crux of the problem. What was the reason for these women to feel so unhappy and so dissatisfied? What was the reason that they had a problem which could not be named, even when they had all kinds of all kinds of you can say happiness around them. They had fulfillment around them. They had every benefit around them, right? They had all kinds of joys around them. They had good family, they had lovely children, they had good husbands, they had lovely homes. So they had everything. They had every kind of luxury around them, but somehow they were not satisfied. So, what was the reason? So, people came out with different superficial reasons to all this. Continuing with the essay, a male humorist joked in Harper's Bazaar, which was published in July 1960, that the problem could be solved by taking away women's right to vote. See, the first wave feminism was about women's suffrage, the right for a woman to vote. So, there was a male humorist joking in one of the magazines, Harper's Bazaar. He said, I think we can solve this problem by not allowing them to vote. In the pre-19th Amendment era, the American woman was placid, sheltered, and sure of her role in American society. She left all the political decisions to her husband, and he in turn left all the family decisions to her. Today, a woman has to make both family and political decisions, and it's too much for her. So, according to him, this man who made the comment, or who joked in Harper's Bazaar that the problem could be solved by taking away women's right to vote. Now, what was the reason why, and how did he try to justify that? He said, before this, in the pre-19th Amendment, that is before this amendment came, allowing women to write, women were always very sheltered. They lived within their families and they were very sure about their role in the American society. They were wives and mothers, right? So they did not get involved in political decisions. All the political decisions and political matters, discussions, everything would be done by the men or by her husband or father, and all the family decisions would be taken by the women, right? But today, this man says, today the woman has to do both. She has to make both family decisions. She also has to make political decisions because she has to vote. And that is the reason why she's feeling so dissatisfied. That is the reason for the problem that she's undergoing. That is what he said. We'll continue. A number of educators. So we see here how people are trying to arrive at why this problem has come up. What are the reasons for this problem? So many of them have different ideas and sometimes even weird ideas. A number of educators suggested seriously that women no longer be admitted to the 4-year colleges and universities. In the growing college crisis, the education which girls could not use as housewives was more urgently needed than ever by boys to do the work of the atomic age. So we see it's after the Second World War. So a number of educators said that it is not necessary that women should do the 4-year degree course or the 4-year college. So after their schooling, they can get married and settle down as housewives and mothers. There's no need to allow them to do this 4-year course in colleges and universities because there was this crisis. So, and they say, this is an atomic age, and the education which these girls would get, and they would not be able to use because they would be housewives and mothers, right? So how would they use this college education? So it's useless actually. It's a waste to teach them all this because they cannot apply that in their domestic sphere. So it's better to get men to do this because it's better to get men into colleges because they can do the work which the atomic age requires. Women would definitely be in the homes. So they just need to learn things which would help them to become good wives and mothers. There's no need to give them college education. Continue. The problem was also dismissed with drastic solutions no one could take seriously. A woman writer proposed in Harper's that women could be drafted for compulsory service as nurses, aides, and babysitters, and it was smoothed over with the age-old panaceas. Love is their answer. The only answer is inner help. The secret of completeness, children. A private means of intellectual fulfillment to cure this toothache of the spirit. The simple formula of handing oneself and one's will over to God. So, people came up with lot of drastic solutions and it could not be taken seriously. Some of them said, okay, let's kind of draft women for compulsory service in the army as nurses, as babysitters. Okay, some others said, see, this problem can be only solved by love. That's a kind of age-old solution. Love is the only answer. They need to get inner help. So, and how do you feel how do you get over your dissatisfaction? How do you feel satisfied? Because the secret of completeness is have more children, right? And then you find out some means to have intellectual fulfillment. It should be private. It's not going out, right? And some others said, you are having this ache of the spirit, and the best way to cure this ache of the spirit is just submitting yourself, your total will, your total self to God. So these are some of the age-old solutions that people came up with. Love, come on, love others, and try to find help yourself. Try to do some kind of meditation which will help you, help to develop your inner self, right? Have more children, or find out some way to have intellectual fulfillment. But it should be a private way. It should not be going out into society and working, right? And the best way is to grow more closer to God. Hand over your will, submit yourself to God, and God will help you to get rid of this dissatisfaction. Continue. The problem was dismissed by telling the housewife she doesn't realize how lucky she is to be her own boss. No time clock, no junior executive gunning for her job. What if she isn't happy? Does she think men are happy in this world? Does she really secretly still want to be a man? Doesn't she know yet how lucky she is to be a woman? So, the problem was dismissed like that. Many people said, hey, you don't realize how lucky you are. You are a housewife. You are your own boss. There's nobody to kind of boss over you. You don't have a fixed time. You can work anytime. And there is nobody below you who is trying to remove you from your position, get your job. There is no boss breathing down your neck. Okay, you're not happy. That happens. Do you think men are always happy? Men also have their problems. Do you really want to be a man? You won't know what the problems men are having. Do you think they are happy? Don't you understand how lucky you are to be a woman? So these were the kind of questions that these women were battered with, right? So they had a problem, and this is how the problem was being addressed. Continue. The problem was also and finally dismissed by shrugging that there are no solutions. This is what being a woman means, and what is wrong with American women that they can't accept their role gracefully. This is what Newsweek put it in March 7th, 1960. So they just the Newsweek, the magazine, said, what? It's okay, there's a problem, right? There are no solutions, so what? This is what being a woman is. What is wrong with you? Why can't you accept your role gracefully? Okay, there are problems. So what if there are problems? Okay, there are no solutions. So what if there are no solutions? This is what you are. Why can't you gracefully accept it? And you know how the magazine went on to say, I'll just read from the text. She is dissatisfied with the lot that women of other lands can only dream of. Her discontent is a deep, pervasive, and impervious to the her discontent is deep, pervasive, and impervious to the superficial remedies which are offered at every hand. An army of professional explorers have already charted the major sources of trouble. From the beginning of time, the female cycle has defined and confined woman's role, as Freud was credited with saying, anatomy is destiny. Though no group of women has ever pushed these natural restrictions as far as the American wife, it seems that she still cannot accept them with good grace. A young mother with a beautiful family, charm, talent, and brains is apt to dismiss her role apologetically. What do I do? You hear her say. Why? Nothing. I'm just a housewife. A good education, it seems, has given this paragon among women an understanding of the value of everything except her own worth. So this is how this is how Newsweek put it. The Newsweek said that American women are so dissatisfied. Many women from other lands would actually dream for a life like her or dream for a life like her. But she is not like that. She's so dissatisfied. She's not at all happy with what she has. Her discontent is very deep. It's very pervasive. And she is oblivious to all the remedies that are offered to her. There's so many remedies that are being offered. But she's so oblivious to all these remedies. There are so many people who have charted the major sources of trouble that she faces. She has trouble. Okay, there is. But there are so many people who have charted the major source of trouble from the beginning of time. You know what they say, the beginning of time, it is, the female cycle has defined and confined the woman's role. From Freud to everyone now, there is a particular role that women have. That is what people have been saying. And many women have never pushed beyond these natural restrictions like this American wife. It is because this American wife cannot accept these things, cannot accept the role that has been designed for a woman. See, if you're a mother with a beautiful family, beautiful children, lovely husband, charm, talent, grace, brains, you have money, then what more do you want? Why do you keep on saying, I'm just a housewife? Right? So the Newsweek said it is the American woman's problem. She is unlike the other women of the world who have gracefully accepted their role. She is not ready to accept her role. She is not happy with her role. So this is what the society was trying to tell these women. They were trying to give her a lot of solutions. They were trying to kind of find out what could be done, or what were the reasons for these problems, what could be done. There were so many reasons, right? So they said she's dissatisfied because of so many reasons, and I've stated all the reasons, and the solution was you accept your role gracefully. That is what the magazines kept on telling her. That is what society kept on telling her. So this is what was happening to the average American housewife. She was unhappy, but the unhappiness that she was facing was not, it was not addressed in a proper manner. So we'll just stop with that for today. We'll continue in the next class. Do you have any questions? If you have any questions, you can ask me now. Thank you then.